Some of the most celebrated names in rock drumming earned their place in history through sheer force of personality, through the bands they belonged to, or through a handful of legendary performances that burned themselves into the culture forever. But fame and ability are not always the same thing. This is a list of 10 legendary drummers who, at some point, found themselves outplayed by someone most rock fans would never recognize. Number 10, Ringo Starr and Andy White. In September of 1962, producer George Martin sat behind the glass at EMI Studios in London and made a quiet, devastating decision. He did not trust the new drummer. Ringo Starr had only just joined the Beatles, and Martin, unconvinced by what he heard in rehearsal, brought in a professional session drummer named Andy White to record what would become one of the most famous singles in British rock history. Ringo was handed a tambourine and told to shake it. Andy White, a Matchman whose name appears in no classic rock hall of fame and graces no list of legends, played the kit on the official studio version of Love Me Do, while one of the most beloved drummers in history stood a few feet away, keeping time on a hand instrument. White spent the rest of his career doing session work, largely invisible to the public. Ringo went on to change everything. But for one afternoon in a London studio, a nobody had his job. Number 9, Lars Ulrich and Dave Lombardo. By the mid-1980s, Lars Ulrich was the face of metal drumming for an entire generation of fans. Metallica was everywhere, and Lars was the engine. But inside the drumming community, a different conversation was happening. Slayer's Dave Lombardo, playing in venues a fraction of the size, was doing things behind the kit that left professional musicians quietly stunned. Lombardo's double bass precision, his control at extreme speeds, and his ability to lock into polyrhythmic patterns without losing the pocket placed him in a category that many working drummers considered simply more advanced than Lars's straightforward approach. When Metallica's Saint Anger arrived in 2003 with its thin, clacking snare sound and stripped-down patterns, the gap in the conversation widened considerably. Dave Lombardo never sold arenas the way Metallica did, but he never had to. Number 8, Bill Ward and Vinny Appice. Black Sabbath without Bill Ward is a sentence that still unsettles longtime fans. Ward was the original, the unpredictable heartbeat behind Paranoid and Iron Man, and a catalog that defined an era. When he departed during the Heaven and Hell period in the early 1980s, largely due to personal struggles, the band turned to Vinny Appice, a drummer who had come up through Dio and Vanilla Fudge. What surprised a number of concert-goers was how tight Sabbath sounded. He was not Ward. He was not the founding Thunderstorm. But on a technical level, many who saw both lineups live quietly admitted that Appice's steadiness made certain songs hit harder in person. Ward brought soul, Appice brought precision. Sometimes precision wins the room. Number 7, Charlie Watts and Jim Keltner. Charlie Watts was a jazz man who wandered into rock and found himself in the greatest rock band in the world. He was elegant, understated, deeply musical in his own way, He also knew his limitations better than anyone. What Charlie provided was feel, not flash, and feel carried the Rolling Stones for decades. Jim Keltner worked alongside the Stones' orbit on various sessions and collaborations over the years. He is considered by many studio professionals to be one of the most gifted drummers of his entire generation, a player who brought jazz sensitivity, rock power, and a technical command that Charlie never claimed to possess. Keltner's name is buried in album liner notes going back to the early 1970s. His fingerprints are on recordings by John Lennon, George Harrison, Bob Dylan, Ry Cooder, and dozens more. He remained almost entirely by choice, a musician's musician. Number 6. Phil Collins and Chester Thompson. Phil Collins was one of the most commercially successful musicians of the 1980s, a singer, songwriter, and producer who also happened to be an exceptional drummer. But when Genesis needed someone behind the kit while Phil moved to the front microphone, they called Chester Thompson, and Chester Thompson quietly handled it. Thompson's live work with Genesis throughout the late 70s and into the 80s was precise, powerful, and technically demanding in ways that Phil's own playing, excellent as it was, rarely needed to be. Thompson played alongside Phil in a two-drummer configuration for years, and musicians who watched those shows often noted that Thompson was doing the heavier lifting. He never fronted a band. He never had a solo career that reached pop radio. But inside that rhythm section, he was a force that Phil Collins himself has acknowledged with genuine respect. Number 5. Ginger Baker and Carmine Appice. Ginger Baker is one of those names that ends arguments. Cream blind faith, a reputation built on sheer ferocity and a willingness to take jazz structure into rock music in the mid-1960s when nobody else was doing it. His drum solos were events. His personality was a weather system. Carmine Appice came up through Vanilla Fudge around the same era and spent the following decades playing with Rod Stewart, Jeff Beck, and a long list of artists across rock and pop. By most technical measurements, Appice was Ginger's equal, possibly his superior in terms of consistent control and double bass technique. He helped pioneer the heavy rock drumming style that Ginger Baker is often credited with inventing. He simply never generated the mythology. That is the difference between legend and craft, and Appice had the craft in full. Number 4. Roger Taylor and Cozy Powell. Roger Taylor of Queen earned his place in history. Bohemian Rhapsody alone would have been enough, and the live performances that followed cemented him as one of the most reliable drummers in stadium rock. But within the world of British rock drumming, Cozy Powell occupied a space that left serious musicians quietly in awe. Powell worked with Rainbow, Jeff Beck, Emerson, Lake and Palmer, and Black Sabbath across a career that stretched through the 70s and 80s. His power behind the kit was extraordinary, and his technical range was broader than his association with hard rock might suggest. He released a solo single called Tim Dance with the Devil in 1973 that reached the top 10 in the United Kingdom, built almost entirely around a drum performance. He died in a car accident in 1998. The rock world mourned briefly, then moved on. Roger Taylor got the documentary. Number 3, Don Henley and Jim Gordon. Don Henley is a good drummer. He is also a great singer and a gifted songwriter, and those talents have always overshadowed what he did behind the kit. Hotel California, Desperado, Life in the Fast Lane, these were songs that demanded a certain kind of playing, and Henley delivered it with authority.
Some dance to remember, some dance to forget.
Jim Gordon played session work at a level that very few musicians in history have matched. His name appears on records by Traffic, Derek and the Dominoes, Joe Cocker, and dozens of others. He co-wrote the piano coda to Layla, one of the most emotionally devastating instrumental passages in classic rock. Gordon's ability to read a session, lock into any groove, and elevate the musicians around him placed him on a different level of technical accomplishment than most touring rock drummers, including Henley. His later life descended into profound tragedy, but the recordings remain, and they are extraordinary. Number 2, Mick Fleetwood and Mick Tucker. Mick Fleetwood built something remarkable inside Fleetwood Mac, a groove-centered approach that served the band's melodic writing perfectly across decades of changing lineups and shifting sounds. He was consistent, committed, and completely right for the music. He was also regularly considered by working drummers to be among the more limited technical players to achieve genuine superstardom. Mick Tucker, playing in the glam rock band Sweet through the early and mid-1970s, was another story entirely. Tucker's drumming on records like Ballroom Blitz and Teenage Rampage was aggressive, inventive, and technically accomplished in ways that most listeners never noticed because the songs themselves were so deliberately commercial.
Everybody was frightening, and the music was soothing, and they all started.
Drummers noticed. Tucker had speed, control, independence between his limbs, and a flair for fills that many session players openly admired. He died in 2002, largely unknown outside a small circle of devoted fans. Mick Fleetwood sold out arenas. Number 1, Bunny, Carlos, and the Quiet Masters. Bunny Carlos sat behind the kit for Cheap Trick through their peak years in the late 1970s and early 80s, and played with a kind of relaxed authority that made difficult parts sound easy. He was not flashy. He smoked cigarettes on stage and looked like he had wandered in from an accounting firm. And he was excellent. What Carlos represented was a whole generation of working rock drummers who never got the magazine covers or the biographies, but who brought something just as valuable as any legend, which was simple, honest competence.
Going to a party, leave me on.
Players like Brian Downey behind Thin Lizzy, Tommy Aldridge across a long career of band-to-band excellence, or Prairie Prince of the Tubes, men who showed up, locked in, and made the music better every single night. The legends got the statues. These players got the recordings. And the recordings, when you listen closely enough, make a very strong case.